I've been involved in many things. I'm an architect and a designer, including housing to designing boilers to so many things. But of late, I've been working on area of games. And believe me, it's the most challenging thing to do. Designing games is extremely difficult. And I've been at it for quite some time now. And I thought I'll share my experiences and share my struggle. I mean, it's a literal struggle to design games and come out with some interesting possibilities in games. Let's first ask this question to ourselves. Is Next and Ladders a game? How many people think that it's a game? Almost all of you, right? Now my task here is to prove to you that Snakes and Ladders is not a game. And I'll tell you what a game is and what a game is not. I would go through the part one very quickly, which sort of tells you the whole history of how I went about it and what kind of games I designed. Part two and part three are more important. Part two is where we're going to talk about the understanding of the game from an insider's point of view, and talk three is what I'm doing now as a new challenge. I started designing games accidentally. There was a competition by Israel Design Center. It was an international competition for designing games for education, and that started me thinking. It was extremely difficult to design a game. I didn't know what to do. I mean, if somebody says, can you design a game for me? There's a big problem is, what do I do? One doesn't know what to do. As a designer, I'm used to somebody giving me a problem, saying, okay, here is my product and this is what I'm expected to do. But somebody says, just design a game, there's nothing you can do. So I started wondering, is this game design a design problem? This was a game that I designed for that competition. This was in 1972, and that was a time when there were 3 years of continuous droughts. And there was a lot of discussion on the issue of rural development and social justice, etc. So this game teaches good agricultural practices, good as understood in 1970s. It deals with opportunities, it deals with problems, and it also deals with resources and how you can judiciously use resources. This incidentally also won an award there in that competition. So I had a dream to change the world of learning by using games. I thought that that's a great thing to do. But the world was not waiting for these ideas at all. Not a single manufacturer was willing to market this game, saying that we are not interested in rural areas, where that's not where the market is. Do something which urban children would like. So the great idea got lost there. I ended up with a lot of questions then. One of them is can you really teach using games? That's one. And are purposeful games liked by people? Purposeful games, there is a purpose behind it, saying I want to teach agriculture practice, I want to teach geometry, I want to teach maybe language or something like that. And the second question that I was interested in is, are game contextual? For instance, there was a drought, so I did a game that deals with development of rural areas. But if it wasn't a drought, what would I have done? So is it very contextual? Games are basically fun and play, and it comes naturally to human beings. Everybody who is brought up a child knows how you play games with children all the time. Actually, giving food to a child is extremely difficult, and you can see what people do. Finally, the food is left on the dish, but you play all kinds of games in order that finally the child eats. Play and fun is natural to even animals. Now the question is, if play and fun is so natural to humans and animals, why is it so difficult to design games? Fortunately, another opportunity came in 2005, when we were asked to work for toy industries, and toy industry was under severe pressure from Chinese onslaught of toys. So we came out with an idea, why not design games so that we don't directly compete with Chinese products one-to-one. So I came out with 2 games at that time. One of them is both of them are in market. One is Discover India, which also tells you about how to remember a map and latitude and longitude. And it also has a challenge built into it. The second game was doubling of Tangram to actually create a strategy game, where you try to complete a square by using double pieces of Tangram, and it's a lot of interesting things that happen. You can defeat a person and things like that. Now, both of them were popular, but there's a question that it led to was, why was Tangle, that was dealing with Tangram, more popular than Discover India? Okay, and one of the learning that I had was that except parents, nobody is interested in educational games. Okay, parents are interested, but they think that there is, okay, after spending so much money, I'm getting something worth. But there are also other people who like manufacture. They're not interested in the educational game, but they want a stamp on it saying this is educational. So first learning was that education in a game has to be covert. It cannot really be direct. Even the children don't take any interest if it is directly educational. Second thing is games are bought and played for fun, and that has to be clearly understood. And any serious learning can actually clash with it. Lastly, designing fun and play is extremely frustrating because you're consciously doing it. It comes naturally, but doing it consciously is extremely difficult. So to answer these questions, I had to start theorizing, and the best way to do for a teacher is to announce a course, which is what I did. I started teaching game design without knowing much about what I'm doing. And that actually made me to read and sort of look at what can be done and what is game, what is not a game, etc. So I started with an elective, and this elective, this game design elective ends in a play session where all the children from the campus are invited to play. And it so happened that all the 6 games that the students had designed were selected by Fun School for producing. And that partnership has continued. So I'll quickly show you some of these games. This is Triplet. Of course, it doesn't look like this. The Fun School, when they produced it, changed it quite a bit. This is a strategy game, and this is another game, Chakravyuha, using the same components. Then there's a gotcha, which actually uses mischief as one way of playing. And there's a triangle. And these are games which are available in there. So there's also something on spying that comes. Now, reflecting on this, I realized that playfulness, fun, and engagement is critical in every game. Now, how do I bring in learning? And this is important for children. And as I'll show you, it's also important for grown-ups, because a lot of these games are played by grown-ups. I'll show you videos of that. When you grow, the children would like games to maybe like Snake and Ladder, which is completely based on luck because you use the dice, to a more involvement of their intellect and skills. So you need to create games which have a range that starts from luck to a mix of intellect and also. Most of the children, and including grown-ups, are interested in that 5 minutes of fame when you win. And let me show you, this is designed by our student, and then that how that occurs is a part of the whole game design process. And you actually, if you see, modern games are designed for a very dramatic end, and I'll show you that later. Okay. Normally, you think that you're a designer, should be able to design a good game, and that's how in my elective it starts, that students start playing with themselves. But there is no way a student or any adult can think himself as a child. So finally we get children involved in the design process itself. So they start coming in the class and start playing games with children, and that's how games get developed. And sometimes they give good ideas, they also give you good evaluation. What you think is a great idea, they just simply say it's yak, I don't want it. And he has to change, there's no option. There's a quick question, is if it is so natural to have fun and natural to have play, why is there a struggle? And that is where I started looking at what are the key elements or what are the key characteristics of games which make it so difficult to design. And let's quickly go through it, and that's part of the part 2 process. Actually, what is a game? Game is to design an artificial world which a player enters into voluntarily. Now, this is important because that artificial world has its own rules. And interesting part about it is that people are willing to listen to any rule that occurs when they enter into it. For instance, nobody asks a question, why does the knight go 2.5? And why does the bishop go diagonal? And why does the rook go straight? Or why queen is more powerful than the king? You play chess, but you never ask that question because you decide to enter that world, you accept those rules. You accept the rules in one card. For instance, why is ace stronger than the king? One doesn't know, but that's the part of the rule of that game. So there is no direct reason or direct mapping between real world and what happens in the game world. But that world has its own rules, and those are important. Second and the most important characteristics of game is that player A, through his action, actually creates a challenge for player B, and a player B actually reverses that. So this is what a game is, and that's why snakes and ladders is not a game, because what you do and what your opponent does has nothing to do with each other. So even simple things like noughts and crosses, you would find that everybody is trying to create a problem for the next person. So you could see that all the moves are based on trying to block completion of that particular row. Something of this kind happens in chess, but in several times more complex than this, because every time a player has several options to work on and his opponents have several options. So what are you trying to do? You're actually trying to make sure that your opponent, great plan that he has in mind is spoiled, and the opponent does exactly the same thing. So that's why chess becomes so interesting, because there are a large number of other options which are available to both the players. Finally, what is important in a good game is that you should never know who the winner is till the end. And this is exactly what separates a test match from T20 or ODI. If you look at an uncertainty graph in ODI till the last, or even the 2020, till the last 1 or 2 overs, you don't know who's going to win. And that's what people get glued to, because they don't know who's going to win, so they keep watching it. In a test match, you probably first 3 days you don't watch, and after that you know who's going to win. It's very rarely that results change. So maintaining an uncertainty through strategies becomes extremely important as far as games are concerned. How do you create actions and counter actions, and what are the strategies? One is through a well thought out strategy, as it happens in chess. You create a strategy and create, try to fox your opponent, or create a difficult target. For instance, in 2020, you find that if the first team creates a huge score, then you create a target which almost looks impossible. Or 200 or 250. The third possibility is opportunities of risk taking, which happens in a game which is played like flush, where you want to take a risk and allowed to take it. And the last one is through acquired skill, where, like in tennis or in football or something like that, it's a skill that matters there. So it's quite possible to create challenges through using any of these 4 things. Finally, if nothing works, then the luck is always a possibility. For instance, snakes and ladders is completely based on luck. There are other games which are based partly on luck and partly on strategies. So what we thought is it possible to go beyond this in the elective that we were offering on game design? And we created some interesting challenges which come from something quite different. These games were made for children. For some reason, grown-ups decided to play it, and you could see when they play, they become children. Okay, this session started at 6 o'clock. The children were initially playing. All the grown-ups came and watched them, and gradually one of them sat, the second one sat, third one sat, and then finally they just simply took over all the games. And they found that we had a problem closing it at 9 o'clock, because they just continued to play as if, and they become almost children. They shout at each other and do all kinds of things. This is a game which is interesting. It is played with eyes. There is a movement to be done, and your teammate, through eye movement, tells you where to move, and you are not able to see where the piece is. It's on the opposite side. Only the part your teammate is able to see it. It's interesting because we normally don't use this ability of using eyes, but it's possible to create very interesting games using that. Then the next challenge was to create learning games. Can we design games which actually teach learning? And I initially criticized it, saying once you have overt learning, children don't like it. So we thought that can we design games which actually have a learning under the table, and they're basically fun. We used to take a lesson from a school book, maybe 6th standard, 4th standard, 5th standard, whatever it is, and convert that into a game. And this is a game which teaches about atomic numbers. It's easy to remember atomic numbers playing this game. Then there is another game which teaches mod, which is another concept which children. Children must know how to use a bracket and come out. It's called zero sum, which was introduced in the Japanese market last May, which was one of the product that got successfully exported to another country. The third characteristics of a game is that games have rules. There are rules that tell you how to play, how to move, skip, add a turn, or declare who should be declared a winner, who gets a penalty, for what purpose, who is out, who has a fault, and what are the kind of errors, whether forced or unforced errors, and how you can interrupt and not interrupt. There are a series of things that happen which are defined by clearly spelled out rules. But there are also rules that create excitement and tensions, and this is exactly what happened with 2020. That because they created rules by which are created what is popularly known as a format, that it became so exciting that you don't know who the winner is, and that's why people get glued to it. So you can actually change rules by which you can create tensions, you can actually create excitement. In fact, that Japanese game that I told you about has a timer built into it, which also creates the same tension. The fourth and important characteristic of that is the players. The players are extremely important as far as game is concerned, but there's nothing that you can do about designing players. But finally, games make them heroes, or they also kind of bring them down anytime. And you still remember things like, everybody remembers Tendulkar, or everybody remembers you is 6 sixes in a single over. That's because players dominate the game. Now, this is again another criticism about games, snakes and ladders. You cannot have an expert in the games snakes and ladder because it's completely based on a die. So you cannot dictate what happens. It's dictated purely by the number that you get. The last component is hardware, and in some cases a unique hardware makes a lot of difference. And third, another possibility is that a hardware is common, but you find a unique way of holding it, a unique way of using it, which makes it very, very different. You could see there's a game called Zynga. It's just a fantastic game. I don't know, some of you must have played it. It has just one rule, so it's very easy to learn. And you can keep on removing the pieces, and at some point it becomes completely balanced and plays. Now, this is because of a unique hardware. Now, it's possible that you can create games and you can create all the tensions and simply by creating interesting hardware. Lastly, the spectators make a difference, though you cannot really see who is going to be there, but they are very emotionally involved. So if you don't perform well in the cricket, there are brickbats waiting for you when your team returns. Okay? It's important now to give visibility to the spectator. That's why you will find camera switching between cricket and the players, or even in football, it keeps going to players once in a while. We have another kind of spectator. Most of the children games, there is a backseat driver. Okay, one child is playing, there's another child who's kind of, helping him to take decisions and things like that. Now, they are also equally involved and emotionally involved in the game design. Just a small detour that most of the modern games is to become make them TV oriented, so that they become faster, they become quicker, they fit into that 22-minute slot, and they're TV friendly. And for instance, entire squash changed because it's now TV friendly. The whole glass cage in which they play makes that game so very visible. So you're trying to build a whole ecosystem around a game by which they can become popular on TV. And spectators expect a dramatic end, and which is what 2020 provides.
Magnificent, in fact, that's all the way. What a way to win this game. India prevail. Not for nothing have they underscored their world champion status.
So the point that I'm making is that dramatic end matters, and that's what Zynga is famous for, because Zynga, things fall down and you don't know when they're going to fall down, but there is a dramatic end. So a dramatic end to a game is equally important. So we saw 6 elements. One of them is game world, which has its own rules and people voluntarily enter it. Then gameplay, which has its own mechanics that operates it. Then rules of play. We also look at players, we can look at hardware, and we can look at spectators. We decided to take a new challenge. I designed this game. Fun School would sell them at 300, 400 rupees and things like that. And most of the games were priced around over 200, which most people find it difficult to access. So in the last 2 years, I have been giving a slightly different problem to students, saying that, can you design a game which can be sold by a hawker on the train, so that they should not be they should cost about 30, 40 rupees or so. So we're talking about frugal games. The idea there was to make them accessible to people. So we started asking this question, how essential is the hardware? Initially, I did mention that hardware is unique. Maybe in a game that requires skill, the hardware is essential. But there are a large number of other games where it's not essential. Second thing is, the quality of the hardware can be very different. For instance, gully cricket is popular, which has very little to do with the actual cricket, but it's played with the same passion. Look there are no stumps, there's just a board there. Okay, the bat is the ball. It's actually played in the basketball court. So it's possible to create games which are a lot more flexible to be played, and you can bring the cost down. It's also, you can play games in informal settings. If this is so, then it should be possible to develop frugal games. So we decided to take this as a challenge. Interesting ideas came out of this, and I quickly go through this. We asked the question, is hardware an essential part of the game or not? A student came out with interesting ideas. You know, what happens instead of using a board, I create board out of cloth and the mother stitches the board for a child, so the cost comes down. Or you can use playing cards. Playing cards are very cheap. Can you create, I mean, it doesn't have to work like a playing card, but you have 54 pieces of standard sizes, and you can create interesting games out of it. So this game actually is a storytelling game, but uses playing card technique, so it's a lot cheaper. Or you can just create just printouts and sell the printouts, and children do the rest. You know, they will stick it on a cardboard and things like that. But we wanted to go further and say that can you really do without the hardware completely? And that is where we decided to put this constraint, saying that a game will not have a hardware at all. And can you really create educational games without hardware? The original Matha Chibi is there on the YouTube.
One member will throw the pebble to
This
get
is
the
about
digit,
addition, subtraction,
other
and
will take care of operators. Now let's play the game with number 29.
you have to construct a number.
You can't use the same operator two consecutive times.
So one team changes the operator, the other team tries to
About throw the pebble outside the grid, and the other is when you throw the pebble on the penalty area.
So no hardware is required, and we thought that we could design games like this. So last about 1 month back, I was in IIT Guwahati, and we designed games which have completely zero hardware. They are all there on YouTube. You can see them as IIT Guwahati games, and you could probably see what they are all about. They are all educational games, but they do not require any hardware at all, so they can be copied by anybody. Okay, thank you and happy playing.